Hey guys, you watching Let's Talk About Prepping. I'm Tyler, your host, and in this video, we're going to finally continue our reading and review of the book Meditations on Violence, a comparison of martial arts training in real-world violence by Sergeant Rory Miller. I believe that as people who want to prepare ourselves to face the future's challenges, preparing ourselves for human conflict is one of the most important things that we can do because it is a staple of human interaction. And this book is a very valuable resource in understanding all forms of human conflict and violence and helping people of all skill levels to build and reassess their planned responses to those conflicts. Sergeant Roy Miller is extremely well credentialed and experienced in the topics that he discusses, and his insights are always on point. Now, if you haven't watched the previous episodes, I'll link them in the description down below, and I do suggest that you get back to them at some point in the future. But this episode, Chapter 3, Violence, discussing the types of violence and how and why they happen, will stand alone. And in fact, it's one of the parts that I've been most excited to get to. It will help anybody of all skill levels to understand why violence happens and how to identify it and how to deal with it. So today's section 3.1, types of violence. Most humans fight for status or territory like other animals. Most conflict is about face or respect, not about necessity. The need to establish a place in the hierarchy of humans is a very powerful drive, one that influences many humans for much of their lives. The fear of being challenged on this basis is also overwhelming and is expressed in many ways. Most people have a fear of talking in public. Many people find it difficult to ask an attractive stranger for a date without alcohol. No one can argue that this fear and reluctance are based on a probability of injury. All that the person stands to lose is self-image, status. Fear of losing this imaginary thing drives a huge amount of violence, from gang shootings to inmate assaults to spouse abuse. That is the first distinction, to understand the difference between violence for status and image versus violence for resources. Here's a concept we will revisit again and again in this book. You are not you. Who you think you are, the story you tell yourself every day, is an illusion. Humans are animals with very real animal needs and senses plugged into a living primal animal world. At the same time, people are bundles of history and interaction and decision and compromise. Somewhere in the midst, between your animal self and your decisions, you tell a story to yourself. Are you the brave and independent woman standing up for herself in the world of men? The terrifying thing about rape isn't the physical damage. That usually heals. It's the destruction of this image. Are you a generally good guy, willing to stand up for what's right? That's why your mouth goes dry and your stomach knots up when someone flips you off in traffic or yells a threat. Because when the rubber hits the road, you may not be who you think you are. You may lose, or you might even run, or crawl, or beg. This story you tell yourself is something you have built up since birth. In a very real sense, it is your life's work. The damage to the story can have longer-term effects than the damage to the body. The risk to the story, to your self-image, status, and ego, can generate far more fear than mere physical risk. It doesn't make sense, but people are weird that way. Patterns of violence. The monkey dance. Remember the saying, when two tigers fight, one is killed and one is maimed? That's a lie. How often have you watched a nature special on TV and seen two grizzlies growling and biting, shoving and clawing? When it's over, one walks away relatively unscathed, and the other keeps the territory. Bighorn sheep rams square off and charge head to head, slamming blocks of horn over bone together until one wanders off and the other keeps the herd of females. If the loser circled around, came back and slammed the winner in the ribs, he would kill him, but they don't do that. This kind of conflict is a ritual with genetically built-in safety measures. Humans are apes, and we have our own built-in ritual combat to establish social dominance or defend territory. It is nearly always non-lethal. I call it the monkey dance. The monkey dance is a ritual with specific steps. The dance, I believe, is innate. The steps may be cultural. In my culture, eye contact, hard stare. Verbal challenge. Example, what are you looking at? Close the distance. Sometimes chest bumping. finger poke, or two-handed push to the chest. Dominant hand roundhouse punch. A very experienced friend has told me that even left-handers tend to throw a right-hand punch, which would be a good argument for genetic predetermination, but I never thought to ask if anyone was left-handed after an incident. Most martial artists and most adolescent combat fantasies are based on this model. It is much easier to prevail in a scenario that is already genetically designed to be non-lethal. The listed step shows only one side of the dance. At each step, the other monkey answers. Think about the number of times you have seen this pattern or participated in it. What you looking at? None of your business. Fuck you. Oh yeah? Closes. Chest almost touching. What you got to say now, motherfucker? Get up out of my face or deal. Yeah? Chest shove. Don't put your hands on me. Swing. Once you feed into this contest, you are no longer in control. It is the product of millennia of evolution. I want to make this perfectly clear. No matter how much I refer to the monkey dance as a dominance game, you do not play it. It plays you. Because it is all about dominance, you can usually circumvent the dance with submissive body language, such as lowering your eyes and apologizing. This has a personal cost, however. For most men, backing down from a status conflict is very difficult and does psychological damage. To understand, think about where this ritual came from. Loose bands of people living on the edge of subsistence, depending on each other, and yet competing for scarce resources. In many cases, like many species, only the very high status males bred. You were only born because a long string of your ancestors successfully played this game. That's a lot of conditioning. In this imaginary band, the alpha males bred. Another loose category struggled for alpha status, and the lowest of the low didn't struggle for it. They had accepted, probably out of fear, a status so low as to be beneath notice. A friend of mine is an author. He's a good man, retired from good service to the community, a wise friend with a good family. He doesn't remember the fights he won and lost growing up, but he does remember the one fight he backed down from. In third grade, he was challenged by a bully and ran. Nearly 70 years later, it still haunts him. You will find this scarring in many people if you look. They did not act the way the person in their private story was supposed to. The key to avoiding the damage is to purposely avoid the dance. If you meekly lower your eyes and apologize out of fear, you will feel terrible about it. If you do it consciously as a ploy, it is far less damaging, but de-escalates the situation pretty reliably. Another method of de-escalation requires confidence. Have you watched a big dog ignoring a pack of puppies that are playing at their little dominance games? The dog understands instinctively that he can only participate in the dominance game if he feels one of the pups is a legitimate challenge to his authority. He actually lowers his status immeasurably by participating. In the big dog tactic, you maintain extremely relaxed body language and treat the verbal challenges as serious, thoughtful questions. What you looking at? I put my hands behind my head and put my feet up on the desk. Just zoning for a minute. Worked double yesterday. How you doing? Acting bored and thoughtful can be very powerful. By not questioning your own status, it makes it harder for someone to challenge you for it. There is more, however. Boredom itself is one of the big indicators of confidence and even status. Whether it is in the boardroom, a job interview, a duel, or a football game, nervousness is the sign of the underdog, the probable loser. The opposite of nervousness can go beyond calm into bored, powerful. There are two related concepts that can manifest in apparent boredom: the Japanese concept of Zenshin and the American concept of cool. In biology and animal psychology, I was taught that animals could tell, often by smell and almost immediately, if a stranger of the same species were higher or lower in status. If two hierarchies of rats are thrown together, the new hierarchy is forged by animals of similar levels fighting. The beta male doesn't attack the alpha male. Humans have this ability. They can often sense danger, authority, or weakness in another human. More importantly, certain people can project an aura of confidence or competence that others read as a clear signal not to monkey dance. The Japanese concept for the ability to project this aura is Zenshin. The word gets translated many ways, as awareness, remaining mind, or indomitable will. It is always tied to both awareness and experience. In my personal belief, the Bushi, Japanese warriors, recognize that this aura is cultivated by a combination of awareness and insight into experience. Though some can put on a good show for a while, there is a huge difference in feel and information between the people who have put their lives on the line and the ones who have only read or daydreamed about it. A self-defense expert who has read Becker and Christensen and McYoung and Strong and Blauer will be able to get good information to their students. In a very real sense, they will know the words but not the music. Experience is only a part of Zenshin. If you don't pay attention to the experience, it might as well not have happened. A person can go to hell and back, but if they spent the trip covering his eyes and chanting, "This isn't happening," he will not develop Zenshin. If you live in denial, hiding from the experience and its effects, you will not develop Zenshin. You must have the experience. You must make the experience part of you by examining it and seeking to understand it, by mining the experience for its lessons. The concept of Zenshin is also tied to awareness. In the situations where experience accumulates, you don't do well unless you are alert. I tell people that being a jail guard is a very safe, very easy job for smart people who pay attention, and a dangerous, difficult job for stupid people who don't pay attention. Heightened awareness is also rewarded, and you will find that veterans of long-term military combat, for example, do not use their eyes, ears, noses, or skin the way that civilians do. For example, some people associate the 1,000-yard stare with shell shock. It's actually a way to use the eyes to detect movement very efficiently and increase peripheral vision. Veterans don't process the sensory information in the same way as civilians either. They often ignore the social context. It is very rare for a combat veteran to decide not to duck out of fear of looking silly. There is a correlation to Zenshin in our culture. Cool. A person can be cool under fire, or cool-headed, or just a cool dude. In all cases, it is a projected aura of competence. My first professional experience in this field was working as a bouncer in a casino. We were escorting a foul-mouthed drunk out, and he turned and swung. I ducked, and he connected solidly with my partner. Two hot young martial artists versus a drunk, and it turned into a wrestling match under the roulette table. Our boss came down from his coffee break. Jim was old. He'd retired from the military as an MP and then retired from a police force. He'd come to work as a shift supervisor in the casino simply because he couldn't imagine not working. He came down the stairs with a cigarette dangling from his lip, a full cup of coffee in his hand, and casually walked over and knelt on the drunk's neck. The drunk went limp. Jim took a sip of his coffee and said, "You boys think you got this from here?" Then he went back upstairs to finish his pie. He didn't spill his coffee. Jim was cool. Jim had Zenshin. There are other demeanors that remove you from the status contest. The monkey dance is based on gaining status, and many who play it want a quick back down with minimal risk. Very few people challenge children, for instance. There is no status to gain. No one plays the monkey dance with a crazy person. There is little chance for status, no guarantee of a quick back down, and crazy people don't always follow the steps. If it's appropriate, circumvent the monkey dance by jumping steps. If the threat is at any level below contact and you attack, you will cause him to freeze. The dance is a biological game, and it takes a small amount of time to adjust when someone cheats. Many people will consider this kind of preemptive strike unjustifiable. Just be sure that you can articulate intent, means, and opportunity. This preemptive movement is the perfect time and psychological setup that allows an experienced officer to handle a threat with low-level techniques such as joint locks. Rarely can anyone make a joint lock work against a strike, outside the conditions of a dojo with people trained to strike in a certain and ineffective way. If the officer waited for the threat to strike, the officer might be forced to strike or even use a weapon, a high risk of injury solution. By jumping steps, the officer is able to resolve the situation at a lower level with less risk of injury to everyone. The monkey dance described here is a male phenomenon. It is very rare in nature for the female of the species to dispute for status and territory. Females are less genetically expendable than men, and the loss, no matter how small in interspecies competition, would damage the evolutionary chances of the species or tribe. Do the math. Imagine 2 tribes, each with 20 people. Each tribe has 10 men and 10 women. Tribe X uses its men to do the fighting, Tribe Z uses its women. The 2 tribes go to war. It's a stalemate, but each tribe loses 3 warriors. The next year, Tribe X has 7 warrior fathers, 10 stay-at-home moms, and 10 babies. Tribe Z has 7 warrior moms, 10 stay-at-home dads, and only 7 babies. Tribe population is now 27 to 24. If they lose 5 warriors the next year, Tribe X will still have 10 babies, Tribe Z will only have 2. Women are too valuable genetically to risk in dominance games in a marginal society. So women haven't been bred to deal with this kind of conflict. This has powerful effects that must be addressed in intergender conflicts. First, remember that the monkey dance is biologically designed to be non-lethal. Damage, when it occurs, is usually cosmetic. Fatalities, when they do occur, are nearly always due to falling and hitting the head. Just as women do not have the ritual of dominance-based violence, they also lack the built-in safety. In other words, if you are dealing with a female threat, she will be seeking to do damage, not to show who is boss. In my experience, women gouge for eyes, bite, and try to cut the face with their fingernails far more often than men. Second, if you are a woman dealing with a male threat, he can still monkey dance at you and perceive you to be challenging him. A significant percentage of the males who prey on women are seeking to safely establish dominance over somebody. In that case, when a woman fights back, the man will react very violently. In his mind, a victim specially chosen to be weak enough to guarantee his validation as a dominator has seen him as weak enough to challenge. A man fighting another man for dominance will try to beat him, but a man who thinks that he is fighting a woman for dominance will be seeking to punish her. Punishment is much worse. Third, there are specific reactions to violence that most women have absorbed at a very young age that profoundly affect their ability to defend themselves. You see this in victims who flirt with or compliment their attacker. You're so handsome you don't need to rape. And you see it in women who struggle instead of fight. Women are used to handling men in certain ways with certain subconscious rules. Social ways, not physical ones. These systems are very effective within society and not effective at all when civilization is no longer a factor, such as in a violent assault or in a rape. On a deep level, most women feel at a gut level that if they fight a man, he will escalate the situation to a savage beating, punishment for her challenge to his manhood. They feel this way because it is true. This is a hard thing to write. Years ago, before I learned to just listen, a friend told me her story. It had been several days and most of the swelling had gone down. She told me about the rape and the beating. I asked her if she had fought. Not my business, and decades of experience later, I would have just listened, but I was young and believed that there were more right and wrong answers than there are. She shook her head and said, I was afraid he'd hurt me if I fought. This fear of escalation is based on unknowns. The attacker has already decided to hurt the victim and largely how much. The feared greater level of damage is only in relation to the level of damage unknown to you that the threat has already planned. If he is already planning to torture and kill, the feared escalation is meaningless, but you can't know his plan at the outset. The choice must be yours, made in an instant and on incomplete information. A fear of provoking a beating or torture or death will not help you if the attacker has already decided on a beating or torture or death. Do not interpret anything I say here to mean don't fight back. I'm also not going to patronize you with half-truths and platitudes. This is ugly on many levels. The level of the incident and the level of social conditioning to get along, which can make it so much harder to decide not to be a victim. This means that if and when a woman chooses to fight, it must be a total effort. In many cases, there is no level of force that will simply discourage a male attacker. He must be incapacitated. This is my advice, and I think this mindset is critical, but the actual statistics are less grim. Many assailants do run away and do not escalate when they encounter unexpected resistance. The group monkey dance. I had some criminals in custody for a long time. There were several co-defendants involved, but I remember 2. One was a skinny pale kid, crying and begging me to put him in protective custody because he was afraid the real criminals in here will steal my food. The other was a young lady, intelligent and articulate. If you imagine the heavy girl with glasses from high school, the one who was on the chess team, you'll have a good mental picture. They were in custody for the savage torture, beating, murder, and burning of a developmentally disabled woman. Neither of them fit my profile of a predatory killer, and yet they killed. The group monkey dance, GMD, is another dominance game. In this ritual, Members of a group compete for status and to show their loyalty to the group by showing how vicious they can be to someone perceived as an outsider. It is purely a contest to prove who is more a part of the group by who can do the most violence to the outsider. To someone who has never seen, investigated, or been involved in the group monkey dance, it is hard to describe. It is hard to explain how completely inconsequential the victim is. Once the dance starts, the victim is literally a non-person. Any action, pleading, fighting, passivity, will be interpreted by the group as proof of otherness and further justification to escalate. Some of the most brutal assaults and murders have been the result of a group monkey dance. When you think of mobs erupting into violence or the unbelievable brutality and destruction of a prison riot or a Central Park wilding, you are thinking of the group monkey dance. When you see soldiers mutilated and their bodies dragged through villages, you are witnessing a version of the group monkey dance. Sometimes, even death of the outsider doesn't stop the dance. The psychology behind this is probably what allowed normal citizens to become death camp guards in World War II. Some people, leaders of violent terrorist or political movements and criminal bosses, use this tendency to influence their followers to kill. In every war, both sides have had a slang term for the enemy to depersonalize them and make them easier to kill, an attempt to emphasize the otherness. Normal people, even good people, can get caught up in the dynamic. In law enforcement, we call it a feeding frenzy. Usually, rookie officers, seeing a use of force and still eager to prove themselves, will jump in, which is fine. Usually, the more officers involved, the less risk of injury. However, if one officer escalates the use of force to a higher level than is justified, others may follow suit. If one continues after the threat is restrained, others may follow suit. The receiving end of the group monkey dance is an ugly, ugly situation. Early in the encounter, you may be able to personalize yourself, share information in such a way that most of the members can't see you as an other, but that will only work in incidents with long preludes, such as some hostage scenarios. 2 non-physical de-escalations have worked for me. In one, I pretended to be crazy, faking a Thorazine twitch and holding an animated conversation with Jesus and Elvis. In the other, this is subtle, I acted like a tough guy while making it obvious that I was much younger and smaller than they were. The tactic allowed them to laugh at me without having to prove anything. Call it the little puppy corollary to the big dog technique. Some have survived by running and hiding, a few by playing dead, others by a counterattack of such awe-inspiring violence that the group was terrified. A friend and fellow officer, who also happens to be strong, quick, a champion wrestler, and nearly 400 pounds, faced with a massive inmates, starting to riot, grabbed the biggest, spun him over his head, and slammed him onto the ground at his feet. Anyone else? No. Good decision. Go to your bunks. Multiple officers decrease risk of injury. I'm going to explain that statement here so that it doesn't interrupt the flow of thought and because it describes an important principle. If you are a bad guy, huge and vicious but unarmed, and I am alone, I need to use as much force as I reasonably believe will get me out of there alive. Preferably, I'll get handcuffs on you too. The idea of using non-harmful restraint techniques against a really aggressive threat is pretty much fantasy. It's hard to catch a fist in the air, impossible to catch a flurry. If I am alone with a big, aggressive threat, I will hurt him. I will hurt him in the way I believe will most likely keep him from hurting me. That means hard, fast, and targeted. One of us is going to the hospital. My job is to make sure it's not me. If I have 6 guys to help me, the principle doesn't change. I need to use as much force as I reasonably believe will get me out of there alive. The difference is that we can assign 1 guy to each limb, 1 to control the head, and 1 to help with anything that gets loose. We can use sheer mass to tire him out and get the cuffs on. Alone, I can almost guarantee serious injury. With enough help, I can almost guarantee no serious injury. There is a lower level of group monkey dance. It happens when outsiders are seen to be intruding into an in-house dispute. This is the mechanism behind the victim in a spouse abuse case turning on the responding officers, or a pair of young fighters, and sometimes the audience, turning on a stranger who is trying to break up a fight. This level is rarely as vicious as the group monkey dance. The group merely wants the outsider out. It does not often turn into a brutality contest. It is still dangerous, very dangerous, as many officers who have responded to domestic calls will attest. Not only will the bad guy fight, but sometimes the person you are trying to help as well. But they probably won't drag your body through the street. Predatory violence. Violence with a goal beyond domination is not like the monkey dance. It more closely mimics the violence between different species. There is an old tale in many martial arts about a Shaolin monk who went out one morning to meditate and watched a crane fighting a snake. The crane used sweeps of its wings as defense and offense, combined with sharp strikes from its beak and kicks. The monk was so impressed with the movement of the crane that he founded the crane or white crane system of kung fu. The crane style became the ancestor of many styles in southern China and Okinawa. That is a pretty story. It's also utter horseshit. Cranes don't fight snakes, they kill them. How does a crane do it? It moves very, very slowly and finds the slowest, stupidest, fattest, and most lethargic snake it can, and it spears it through the back. When a bear wrestles with another bear for dominance, it is nothing like the ambush and charge that the bear uses on an elk. When tigers battle for territory, the loser leaves. The very fact that he is able to leave indicates that the other tiger did not treat him like a water buffalo. The dominance ritual of rattlesnakes can be mistaken for mating unless you are an observant herpetologist and notice that both snakes involved are male. It's nothing like the way rattlers kill mice. In predatory violence, the victim is a resource. The attack is a planned, efficient, and safe way for the attacker to get what he wants from that resource. It is not a contest. It is not a fight. It looks and feels nothing like competition at any level. Generally, human predators use two distinct strategies to approach and disable their human victims. The blitz attack is the sudden, brutal assault from ambush. The threat will get as close as he can without being noticed or triggering a defensive response, and then attempt to overwhelm the victim physically and mentally with a fast, vicious attack. The second attack strategy uses charm and persuasiveness to get close enough and keep the victim off guard. It then progresses like a blitz with an overwhelming onslaught. Generalization alert. The worst attacks happen this way, and these are the situations that it is most critical to prepare for. But in the interest of accuracy, I must tell you that the most common attack for a male-on-female assault was 1. The victim was approached from the rear, side, front, a threat was made with a weapon, and then the weapon was hidden. Then the victim's right upper arm was held by the attacker's left hand, and the victim was led away. From the excellent article, Condition Black, Assault in Progress by R.J. Nash. Gavin de Becker, in his book The Gift of Fear, has detailed the ploys that predators use to get close to victims. I can't improve on that list and recommend the book. For now, think of one key point. People are not charming. It is not an inherited trait. Charm is something people use, a conscious act to get what they want. There are no charming people, only people who use charm. The predatory threat has a goal: your money, rape, or to live out a long-held fantasy. His actions are to further that goal at the least risk to himself. He chooses his victim, picking someone who looks weak, distracted, and passive, chooses a time and a place where everything is in the predator's advantage, and strikes suddenly and decisively. Though the dynamics of the attack are similar, there are two distinct types of predators. All predators see the victim as a resource. For some, the goal is something, tangible or intangible, that they will have after or at the end of the attack. Money, the rape, status, drugs. For a very few, the point of the attack is the attack itself. The torture murder, or torture rape follows a different dynamic than the simple crime. These are predators who have scripted a fantasy of the crime in their imagination. They are acting out that fantasy. Call them process predators. Regular predators are more likely to run in packs than process predators. Very, very few martial artists have a realistic idea of a predatory attack in their training assumptions. So I think that will be it for this episode. We'll go on to section 3.2 as soon as possible, but there are quite a few sections in chapter 3, and it would just be a lot to have people listen to at once. So I hope this has been interesting. I hope it has been valuable to you guys, and I hope that you'll stick around for more of these from Let's Talk About Prepping. Again, the links to the past episodes are in the description down below, and if you want more extremely valuable information on self-defense, check out Corsair Trainer's channel. Link again in the description down below. I hope you're all doing well. Everybody, stay safe out there.